Hey guys, welcome back to Silence is Canceled. This is Sid McGregor, one of the co-hosts of this show. I'm here today with Chris Williams. We work for a organization called Way Thru. We're a nonprofit, and our goal is to open doors to mental and emotional wellness. One of the ways that we do that is by providing access to therapy for people who need it. So if you or someone you love needs help, please visit our website at waythru.org and let us help you find your way through. So today, Chris, it's October the 10th. It's World Mental Health Day. And you and I had talked about sort of the difference between mental health and mental illness. I think a lot of people, myself included, I get like you can really get confused by those, and you can mush them up without if you don't think about it too well. So help me understand, like, what's the difference between mental health, mental illness? What are we talking about here?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is that we have to recognize that we have it, and so if we put it in the same categories of like our physical health, so we can all recognize we have our physical health, in which we have a whole medical industry and fitness and health industry that's multi-billion dollars wrapped around that particular issue that we all just sort of take for granted, that we recognize that we have it. And we recognize the feedback mechanisms around that, meaning that like we know, like, hey, if we're sick, we know the symptoms, we know what to look for, we know how we're feeling, and we generally kind of know what to do with that. Again, There's a lot of debate in that, but we're very well aware of it, and it's not a big deal. It's just we're somewhere on the spectrum of our physical health or illness.
Right.
Our mental health is the exact same. It's just a very particular part of our body, usually starting with our brain. And so we just have to recognize that we all have mental health, and that where mental illness comes in, if I were to say that physical illness is where our body is working against us in some way rather than for us. And so if I come up with a broad category that just simplifies it, but makes it accessible, is that mental illness is our mind working against us rather than for us. And obviously there are, just like in our physical health, many, many different variables, many different factors, and many different symptoms that could show up as. But it's critically important that we recognize it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Like the CDC, defines it, kind of in like a sort of a clinical term. It's like mental illness are like conditions that affect a person's like thinking and mood and behavior, and then mental health is like our emotional and psychological, like our social well-being, like how we act and how we feel. But I like this idea of like. Yeah. It's whether it's working for you or against you. It's like, let's make this simple, right? Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of, and this is something that I think A Way Thru is really trying to come back, and not just us, but like, you've got, mental health and mental illness, like these conversations are being had at levels that I think we've not seen in a while. Thanks to Simone Biles, thanks to Naomi Osaka, thanks to these people who have been bringing it to the prominent, and not just they're just the most recent, but it goes back. But I think there's still a strong stigma around it. What are some of those? What are some of those misconceptions that you experience as a therapist that people are hesitant to, I guess, engage in the conversation or address it? We could probably have a whole other conversation on what the actions that like stigma makes us do or or doesn't do. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I think we oftentimes think of stigma as something out there, and certainly it is. Certainly, there's still beliefs out there that mental illness is only about people who are crazy.
Mm-hmm.
More subtlety in that is mental illness is about weakness. I'm like, well, it is about vulnerability for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Just like our physical health would be, but it isn't a matter of like better or worse, stronger or weaker. It's a matter of like every single person shows up on planet Earth with particular strengths and particular vulnerabilities, you know, and so
Right.
uh, those vulnerabilities can be biological or
Mm-hmm.
genetic. They can be environmental, experiential, the things that happen to us throughout our life. They could be maybe things, toxins in the environment itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of these factors that play into it again are going to affect us one way or the other. So, but if I admit that I have something wrong and now I've got to go see someone or seek help, I'm admitting a vulnerability. And we as people, for whatever reason, hate doing that.
Right.
Now, some people are smart enough, wise enough, humble enough to be like, hey, there's something wrong, go get help. Like as
Mm-hmm.
simple as that. And I wish we could all make it. I wish I could make it that simple.
Yeah, that would be
But
easy.
oftentimes my own defense mechanism inside of me. So there's this weird thing of there's an internal stigma that we've made, that
Mm-hmm.
we create meaning out of, that block us. But obviously there's things in the culture as well that put mental illness, and usually it's an inaccurate stereotype,
Mm-hmm.
whether that be a depiction in a movie, like, hey, if the mentally ill you're going to find in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest,
Mm-hmm.
not realizing that that movie is depicting, and again, it's depicting something is on the extreme,
Right.
very, very, very exceptional side of mental illness. And so, but again, if we come back to it and understand that, man, like today I woke up maybe groggy, I
Mm-hmm.
woke up, kind of in a low mood, low motivation, had a hard time getting going. But maybe that's been my case all along. So I just call it Sunday or I call it Tuesday. It's no big deal. Not realizing that there's actually something happening inside of me that's working against me. My mind isn't as clear and awake and as motivated
Right.
as it potentially could be because I'm on the more ill side than I am on the health side.
Yeah, it's like
And
there's this great article that was released today, actually, on um, medical news today, and the first sort of myth that it lists as the myth of mental illness is that it's not common, and it's like, no, it's
I
actually
laugh
very
because I'm like, oh
common,
my gosh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And apparently, um, like for instance, like depression and things similar to that have tripled during the
Hmm.
pandemic, according to like the
Yeah.
World Health Organization stuff. So it's not, I mean, tripled. You're talking like in like 2017, apparently it was like 264 million. I mean, I don't know how they calculate this, but so you triple that, and this is not a uncommon thing um,
Hmm.
anymore. And maybe it's never been
Yeah.
uncommon. Maybe we're just now talking about it.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I could play armchair sociologist or, but I do think that there's common factors that we experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important to know what those are. For instance, anxiety. Our
Mm-hmm.
worry and anxious levels increase, and you race that much cortisol through the body, it's going to have a negative impact.
Right.
It also eats a ton of energy.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go back to the end of 2019 into the beginning of 2020, and our world automatically starts shifting. I'm a sports guy, so I'll never forget right before NBA games were about to start, they pulled players off the court, went back to the locker room, and emptied out the arena. Something that I had never seen or imagined I would see in my entire life.
Yeah.
So when shelter in place starts happening and things get taken from us because of a threat, our whole, even for the best of us, there is a major disruption that happens. And any disruption is going to increase a level of worry and anxiety through uncertainty in the midst of all of that.
Yeah.
And so unless you're like a Trappist or a Buddhist monk that can kind of like who's practiced unbelievable mindfulness through for years and years and years, the disruption is going to be real, and because it's global. So now let's think about, we've ramped up that much anxiety racing through us over and over. You layer on that cultural unrest, political unrest, racial unrest, you know, what we feeding ourselves through social media, and more anxious and angry and frustrated or sad and loss and reactivity, that burns energy at phenomenal rates. And when that energy gets burned out, it's going to crash. And what that oftentimes looks like is depression. And so we're bouncing through anxiety and depression. And then what I'm noticing around me here this fall is that what was our collective anxiety has now turned into collective exhaustion. People are just tired and they're worn out. Now, again, that's about our mind and our body working a little bit against us rather than for us. Now, we're going to experience that on a very, very wide range of spectrum, from mild to severe, but it feels like we're all in that milieu together. And so if we can all kind of recognize it, it'd be great.
Yeah. And it's like, I know it's a lot of these things are heightened right now because of the pandemic, but it seems like it would be good to note, or at least have a awareness of, that these are like normal parts of life. Like, it's not some abnormal thing, right?
No. Yes, absolutely. A very, very normal part of life.
Yeah. So something happens and it disrupts what's happening, a conflict, be it COVID where your entire world falls apart, or something small, and that's going to affect, at least in a little bit, your state of mind.
Yes. And we have to understand that these things are cumulative as well. They stack up, they build up on each other. They're not isolated or compartmentalized here and there. So if we had vulnerabilities to depression, anxiety, maybe a bipolar process, or whatever the case may be, if we're struggling with OCD, anything before the pandemic, during the pandemic, is going to most likely be accentuated. It's going to ramp up.
Right. But even when the pandemic ends, in the world those things are still going to be there. Yeah,
absolutely. And so one of the things I've seen over and over again is that, especially those who have experienced painful childhood, what we call adverse childhood experiences, is that when the pandemic hits, when multiple stressors hit, and especially relational stressors, all of the symptoms that they experienced before, one of those being what we call emotional dysregulation, which is just a fancy way of saying that, like, man, I have a lot of loud, intense feelings that I can't get my hands around or grip, and that's overtaking me. And there's real suffering there, real suffering that needs help. And I think the painful thing for me is that there's help out there for that. And we do not have to suffer, at least not to the extent that we are, with these conditions, with these experiences.
Yeah, and you've kind of touched on some of the sort of top myths that sort of surround the mental illness, which is, they're uncommon. Not true, they're common. That it's a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of weakness. It's like, as this article says, it's like a broken leg. Like, it's not weakness, it's just something broken and it's not going to be fixed tomorrow. You just
Yeah.
give it some time and the right treatment, and you're on your way. Um, uh, One of the myths that they list, which you'll find is funny because it relates to you, is only people without friends need therapists. I thought that was a good one.
Well, I will say that people without friends do need therapists to figure out how to get friends. So I won't disagree with that. But that's also that would be for me no different than saying, cancer patients just need more friends. What?
Yeah. What?
That doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
Mental health problems are permanent. That's another big one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that could be fear. Like, again, I'll go back to one of the things that perpetuates stigma is diagnostics, and all that is saying that, like, a person with major depressive disorder, a person with an anxiety disorder, a person with or what we call mood disorders, all of those sort of disorders, even the language around it. But we are not our diagnosis. And it's so critically important, and I'm very passionate about this, is that diagnostics are a tool of the clinician to hopefully treat well.
Yeah.
But when diagnostics are weaponized against people,
it's a problem.
As a form of oppression, we got a huge, huge problem. And that's why I oftentimes cringe when I see all of these terminologies and all these uses used culturally, especially around things like narcissism and stuff. I'm like, listen, these are not to be weaponized. That's a misuse of the tool here, and that can be really damaging. And again, people who show up in my office, I'll say this: initially, it's not about what's wrong with them, not at all. By mere fact that they showed up in my office, it's actually about what's right with them. What's right is they recognize that something isn't working in their life, and they're going to seek help. Now, I'm not even saying that, like, hey, I'm the person that can do it or anything like that, but just the action of doing it, again, is a sign of wisdom and strength, not of weakness or, pathology, I would say.
Yeah. Well, not to sound like, I mean, and I don't want to turn this into some sort of self-help thing. Do these 5 things and everything is fine. But but like today is, it's mental health. It's World Mental Health Day. So if somebody is, say in this, this sort of, well, we're all in this pandemic, but I think you would agree that some people are feeling it way more than others, and that's depending upon 1,000 different circumstances. But what are some sort of top level things that people can do today, right now, to take control and improve their mental health? Like, what are some very tangible things people can do?
I think the very first thing is what we've been talking about, is awareness and self-awareness. I mean, self-awareness is a superpower because we all have, if I can say it like this, a dashboard. Oftentimes our emotional experiences or mental experiences are a dashboard that tells us something's working, something's not working. And if we keep it really simple, like, hey, man, my mood, the way I feel is working against me, or hey, my thoughts are like really negative or critical, or I'm constantly disconnected. Oh, that's all just feedback mechanism that says that something isn't working or working well for me. So when we start with self-awareness, we also got to look at similar things for all of us, is that the quality of our relationships, if we're in relational discord, if we're going through some deep conflicts or breakup of the family or isolation, these things are going to have pretty profound impacts on us. And so we want to keep building healthy relationships. But we also need healthy practices. The
Mm-hmm.
food that we put in our body, the drinks that, the drinks that we put in our body for that matter. It all has an impact and an effect. And the healthier we are, the more resiliency that we can build up. But I think the final thing is that, and not the final, it may be the first thing, is that if you've struggled against something and you can't figure it out, for instance, if you just can't find the motivation, or you're just at constant odds with people, you want to retreat from the world, um, or you're just anger seems to come up outside of your control over and over again. So all of these indicators that are saying that, like, man, it's not working. So seeking therapeutic help is a great and viable option.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that you've summarized that well. And I know you, just to make it personal, just for me, it's that self-awareness is that's the key. And I know,
Mm.
just for myself, the way that I sort of make sure that I'm staying self-aware, because it's easy to just disassociate yourself from your own self, is is just asking why. Yeah, like
Mm.
I have
Yeah.
something and
Yep.
I respond to something, and I just like, why did I respond
Hmm.
that? I mean, I might not ask it right in that second, but a few minutes later, when I realized that I did not handle that well, it's like, why did I
Hmm.
do that?
Yeah.
As opposed to
Yeah.
just whatever, just going to keep going. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I think that you're,
Yeah.
that's the right.
Because if
Yeah.
we find ourselves edgy or more
Mm-hmm.
irritable. Like those are really key indicators that something is off. You know, if I find myself more isolated and withdrawn, those are key indicators.
Yeah.
And one of the things that makes this really difficult to recognize is, especially our brains, are are mechanisms of adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
And meaning this, its primary job is to keep us alive.
Mm-hmm.
And so it adapts to whatever it experiences and normalizes it, right?
Right.
So that's what makes some of these things really hard to recognize, even with self-awareness. And so, in what I've had to learn, and I'm still learning over the years, and going to continue to still learn, is this real, again, another superpower called humility. And humility
Right.
just is my openness to the feedback of other people.
Right.
So I may just be in my adaptation, my stress adaptation, and my wife is like, "Hey, man, there is an edge to you, dude. Like,
Right.
what is
What is
going
going
on?"
on?
And of course, in my defensiveness, I'm just like, "What's going on? Well, you do this and this and this," not realizing that if I take a deep breath and I'm like, "Oh, huh, I've been edgy for a week now."
For
That's
a
a problem.
week.
That's an issue.
Yeah.
This is something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. There's a
Yeah.
thorn somewhere that keeps poking me, and I need to find it.
Exactly.
I think we've all
Yeah.
we've all definitely been there. Um,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. Well, so basically, to summarize, sort of our talk today is, mental health, mental illness. It's to summarize it, it's just yourself working against yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So, and mental health is getting yourself working for yourself. Yeah.
yeah, and being able to recognize that and sort of start to ask yourself questions is kind of the
Hmm.
first step to, or may, for some people, may even be the only step that they need to sort of correct those, you
Yeah.
know to help them get back to the mental health that they want to have, that they need, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's journey is going to be different.
Hmm.
So thanks for sharing today.
Well, and
And
I just want to jump.
go ahead.
Yeah, let me jump in with one other thing. There's also just a lot of resources out there.
Yeah.
Like NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness.
Hmm.
Sid, you and I have been doing a lot of talks around a documentary uh, on Apple TV called The Me You Can't See,
Yeah.
which I think is does an incredible job of showing us what mental illness and especially some of the impacts of trauma have on our lives. And so check out some of these resources because oftentimes they help us connect to what's going on inside of us as well. And I just look back, especially throughout my life, but especially in 2020 into 2021 and the struggles that I've had. And I'm like, I can't imagine doing that without the therapeutic guidance that I've gotten from my therapist. And
Right.
so
which is a
I'm
powerful
sure I
statement because
adapted
you're a therapist saying
as
I
a
would
therapist,
not have made it through this pandemic without my own therapist. I would have lost the plot.
Yeah. Well, and as many times as I did lose the plot, that guidance helped me get back to the plot over and over and over again. Yeah. Yes, and I say calibrate my own behaviors and patterns and thoughts back to something that moves the needle towards healthier.
Right.
And that's what we're looking for, is we're just looking to move the needle to healthier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Chris. And thank you for listening and or watching this podcast, however it is that you are getting it. If you need help, please, we want to help you find it. So go to waythru.org and let us help you find your way through. And if you want to help us do that, there are many ways you can do that, and you will see that on the website. Thank you guys. As always, stay safe and let the people around you know they matter. And please know there's always a way through. We'll talk to you next time.